Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. That's Rob, I'm Brian. Today, 2 minutes ago, was the Hungarian Grand Prix. Way better than I'd hoped it was going to be. But again, we set expectations very low. Rob, how are you, man?
I'm really good, thanks. I've just come back from being down the Iron Horse Sports Bar in Unionville, so shout out to those guys for opening for us again. We had a nice little crew down there, and as we were walking out, I turned to my neighbour Jim and I said, I think I've got a very dirty side of the track analogy for today's race.
Okay.
And he said, okay, what? I said, well, you remember, you don't name the sandwich after the bread. So today's race, and we'll get there when we get into it fully, but I'm going to call it a boring sandwich served on bread of excitement.
I like that.
Because
the
it
beginning and the
started
end
with-
were
Yep.
phenomenal. The middle,
Yes. So it was a boring sandwich today.
that wasn't even a sound effect. I just replayed laps 30 to 40 in my mind. Fell asleep.
So we'll get there. As always, we'll dive into news and social. We will crack open the video vault. Only this week we won't slam it straight shut because there's actually content in there. Talk about practice, talk about quali, talk about the race. And then before we head into the summer break, take one last look at the constructors and drivers standings, listen from Pitlane Paul, close out the first sort of half of the season of Rob versus Brian, and then wonder what the heck we're doing next week. So
We may have to award the first half fantasy t-shirt next week because it is still projected points or proposed points, or what do they call them now? It is, projected
Provisional.
points. Yeah.
Oh, projected. Okay. Well, let's dive into the news then. A story that has just been rumbling on for a million years has finally come to an end and maybe put the final nail in the coffin of silly season question. Max announced he's staying. First, it was Helmut Marko confirmed that Max Verstappen will stay at the team for the 2026 season, and then Max himself came out and said it later. So, Max to Mercedes, and who will he push out of a seat, and then when will they go, and where will all the dominoes of silly season go? Yeah, that ain't happening.
And you know what? Last week you said I got something right. This week I must do the same. I was sort of hoping, willing this into happening for a little bit of chaos and fun. And I thought it might. I thought the Sardinia trip was real. I was bought in on the rumors. I was in the chopper over the rumor mill, flying it myself like the Airwolf pilots we saw this weekend in Hungary. And you said, nope, not going to happen. And you, Robert Q Vale Incorporated, you were right.
Yeah, but you're only setting me. I mean, well, I thank you for that, sir. And we do like to give each other kudos when each other is right.
Which
You're
is
just
rare.
putting that in now because you're going to be claiming that you were right when we get to the end of the race. But we'll wait.
I mean, I'm going to at least say I saw something potentially happening that you weren't sure about. I didn't say it was
True.
going to happen.
Anyway,
Yeah.
come on, back to the. You found a little statoid here, so you'd like to do the SAP stats.
So
let you
last
take this.
week, the Belgian, not full stats, and again, because we're going so fast, one more week without full SAP stats, I apologize. But the Belgian Grand Prix podium, the Belgian Grand Prix, which did not deliver, shared everybody on the podium had 8 wins. It was Oscar's 8th win, Lando had 8 wins, Charles had 8 wins, and the person who waved the checkered flag, Jackie Ix, 8 wins. So last week was the 8-win podium. And I know. I just saw that and I'm like, it kind of tickled my fancy, especially with Jackie X being 8 as well.
And what also tickled my fancy was the news that Fred Vasseur has been renewed on a multi-year deal for Ferrari. So the rumours about the Horn Dog coming in and maybe being Ferrari TP,
Horn Dog.
that's all gone away. Fred gets given the second chance that I think he deserves. Whether or not you criticise this year's car or this year's sometimes strategy calls, anybody that does kind of throw shade, I think that you say on that, is forgetting what the clown show became before him.
Yes.
Like, just wind back a couple of years. We had the Benny Hill music going all the time. Ryan had 1,000 sound bites for
Right.
question. What
they
are
all
these
ended.
tires?
They all ended with this.
Question.
100 of them.
So I kind of thinking that Fred has steadied the ship, and maybe it just takes a little longer to get kind of championship-winning car and team behind him. So
If you zoom back out, if you look at the macro versus the micro, yes. Are they challenging for race wins now? No. Are they better than they were before? Yes. And you can kind of see a multi-year projection that's going in the right direction. I think you have to give that to Fred. I'm excited he's sticking around. Because I think they are going in the right direction. And who knows what 26 will bring. It's like, why would you shake up the entire snow globe when things could be worse next year. So I think you got to wait and see where everything happens in 26.
Yep. And then a post we did on social media, and then I followed it up with a kind of a bit more of a deep dive into it in the newsletter, which has now pivoted away from just being a recap of the podcast. So if you listen to this and you took a look at the newsletter and you thought, well, that's just telling me what I've already listened to on the pod, then we took that feedback. It's all new, improved newsletter. So get
And by
subscribed.
we mean Rob, because he does the newsletter. So thank you, Rob.
Anyway, there was a lot. I did not realize how much there was going to be backlash to them not racing in the wet right at the beginning in Spa last week. It went crazy. I went down. If Brian goes down random rabbit holes looking for videos for the video vault, I went down equal rabbit holes, but you wouldn't believe the conspiracy theories. The one that was gaining traction was that the FIA waited for the track to dry as long as possible because McLaren was set up for a drier circuit and Max and some of the others had gone all in on a wet circuit. So they waited until it was dry to guarantee a McLaren 1-2.
Is there a sound that tinfoil hats make?
I think so. You got to imagine a tinfoil hat and it's like a cuckoo clock at the front. A cuckoo comes out of the tinfoil hat. But so anyway, I did what I sometimes do when I used to do the blog or whenever we do Vale's Tales, is I got my sleuth detective hat on and started looking at things. And I went through a lot of Google images, although somebody on Threads pointed out that I think I got my first image wrong because I think it was a ground effect car. So I did some more and then found one that wasn't for the newsletter. 2 pictures of 2 cars, both in full wet tyres, in pretty much the same area of the Kemmel Straight, in the wet. And the difference in spray is phenomenal compared of ground effect versus pre-ground effect.
Yes.
And I've got some more pictures of the underside of cars to put in the newsletter to show what we mean. Old days, it looked about as low tech as you can imagine. If the top of a car is like scientific wizardry for aerodynamics, the underside used to be a flat tray with a plank.
It was. The entire underside of the car department was one guy with like a ruler. He's like, how long should it be?
It looked like one of those cheap toy cars you used to get as a kid, where all the detail went onto the top
Borrego
of it.
has more variation on the bottom of their cars than old cars did.
And then you look at the new ones, and it's all tunnels and systems and blah, 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 all to create ground effect, which sucks the car down. So, of course, what happens with suction? It lifts water off the track, where the old ones were just being pushed down. The new ones are being pushed down and sucked down. So it sucks up all this water. And then the other thing that we did when we did the deep dive into these regs back in 2022 is they changed the back of the cars so that the dirty air was thrown up and out so that the dirty air wouldn't hit the car directly behind, because they were trying to allow cars behind to follow closer. They were like, yeah, we'll do ground effect. Now you won't be as reliant upon aero surface. You'll get sucked down by the ground effect and the dirty air will be thrown high and wide. What could possibly go wrong? Well, nothing. We got some great close racing, but as soon as water falls down, these new cars suck it all up off the surface and then feed it into the back of the car where it sprays it high and wide.
Yeah, exactly. Which means if you were actually wet enough for the blue tires, there's no visibility. So that's why they don't get used. It's not the tires' fault. It's the design of the cars creates no visibility at that much rain.
Yep. So case closed. Maybe 2026 will be better because the cars are going to move away from reliance on ground effects. So if they move away from ground effect, they don't suck up as much water, then in theory there's not as much of it thrown into the air. So maybe the blue tire makes a resurgence in 2026 onwards.
I'm not buying stock in it yet, but you never know. We got a peek into Pirelli's planned tire compounds for the rest of the season. And I'll do this quickly because I am a tire nerd, but I do want to do a little explanation. We've made a couple comments about the different compounds, and people have asked, what does that mean? So the C1 is the hardest compound tire. This year it goes through a C6, which is really, really soft. In years past, it stopped at 5. The C6 is an addition on the super soft end of the range. Pirelli brings 3 sets of compounds each race, and you can have a race where you have C4, C5, C6, which are the softest end of the range, and the C4 is therefore the hardest of all those 3, hardest tire. It's the hard tire. You could then have another race where it's a C1, C2, C3, and the 3 would be the red-striped soft tire, even though it's still harder than the hard from the other race, but it's a soft. So it's all about within that race window for that weekend. And last weekend, we got real nerdy, and this is where the questions came from, about Spa having non-sequential compounds. We had the hardest, the C1. We did not have a C2. we had the C3 and the C4. And as I mentioned last week, had the rain not fallen, there was a chance that that gap could have caused a real strategic set of ramifications. It didn't because the rain took it away. And so I was looking forward at two things. One, in Baku, let's all get excited because we have the three softest tires. We are going C4, C5, and C6. We have seen that the C6 is almost useless. It is barely even a Qualy tire. So there are going to be some very soft tires in Baku. We probably are looking at a two-stopper question. I don't know, but you'd have to assume, which will bring strategy in. So I'm already looking forward to that from a tire perspective. And somehow, after not having had a non-sequential set of compounds in a couple years, we have two more coming up. Coda will be similar to what it was in Belgium with the hardest of hards, the C1, no C2, and then C3, C4. And then Mexico City, where they're trying to bring some strategy into play. Thank you. I hope it works. We have the C2, no C3, and then we have C4, C5. So we go the two traditionally softer tires with one step harder for Mexico. So anyway, more to come. I'm not trying to tell you that those three races are going to be bangers, but if you're watching Baku, Coda, and Mexico City, it'll at least be fascinating.
And if anybody's still awake after that tire talk, then we'll now move on to the next story.
Saps Tire Talks.
Thank you for attending my TED talk on tires. Right.
Please wake up your neighbors. It's time to leave.
Lewis dropped some cryptic post which no one's got a clue about, and nothing has transpired this week since he first dropped it. It was just a post with 8-8 as a date on there. And now everyone's going into meltdown as to, is that going to be a new thing from him? Is he dropping music or some merch? And then there's another splinter of online community saying, no, he's going to retire. He's announcing his retirement on 8 dates. Like,
on Friday? That's this coming Friday.
So something's happening from Lewis this weekend. I'm imagining I'm getting ready to file it under Nothing Burger, but
isn't maybe he's predicting his next shirtless thirst trap Instagram post, because whenever he does that, someone gets fired from within the paddock. So like maybe that's what it'll be.
Oh gosh. The F1 movie has now surpassed 500 million. In fact, it's gone past 509 million globally at the box office. So that's doing pretty well, despite the fact everyone still seems to want to hate on it for not being a documentary. So
yeah, I still love it. Aston Martin sold its stake in the Aston Martin F1 team for, and I'm using Vincenzo Landino, friend of the show's, information here, $146 million. That brings the value of Team Silverstone to $3.2 billion, and we're in American dollars here. The buyer of the stake is yet to be confirmed. Aston will maintain a commercial relationship through a long-term branding agreement. So a branding agreement, much like Alfa Romeo, had nothing to do with the car except marketing materials. It was a Sauber, it was, Ferrari engine, yada, yada. Same thing here. We'll see in the future an Aston car. However, my question was, 146 out of 3.2 billion valuation. So I did a little mathematician here work. 5%. They only owned a 5% stake in the team, and we make it sound like Lance's dad runs the whole show. He had a 5%. I mean, $146 million is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I'm going to go buy a 5% stake in the team, but 5%? So I was shocked. When they said they sold a stake in its stake in the team, I was sure it was going to be a lot more money.
Which bit does Lance... What did Lance buy? Lawrence. What did Lawrence buy? Did he buy Aston Martin or did he buy the race team?
I think he bought both.
So if he owns both, then he owns way more than just 146 million, right?
He should own more of the team still.
Yeah, okay. So it's not like that was his only bit that he owned.
No, I don't think so. But I'm fairly certain he bought it out of administration when it was Force India, right?
Yeah.
And then he separately bought Aston Martin. And so there was apparently some investment made that he, I guess, monetized. But, I don't know. It'll be really curious. I'd like to know ownership stakes. So hopefully when we find out who bought, we can find out percentages too.
Yeah. Yep. Now, if you really want conspiracy theory time, Turkey have came out and announced that they want a full-time spot on the calendar. They stepped in for a couple of the COVID races, and they've said, we are ready to step in should any race get cancelled for any reason. It's a really bizarre statement to put out. I mean, how many races get cancelled? I'm like tinfoil hat time. If you spot some Turkish-looking folk around Grand Prix tracks in the future and they're doing anything that looks a bit suspicious, you might want to phone it into the FIA.
Do you remember that fake picture recently of Zandvoort having flooded out and lost half the track? And it was totally fake. Any rumor that there were some Turkish secret agents out there making that happen?
Opening up the dam.
Yeah, exactly. Let's break some of these dikes open so that the place floods and see what happens.
Right, now last one. I put this one in purely to pay homage to the man, the myth, the legend that is Pitlane Paul and his ability to tell you stuff that by the time we record it is already out of date. So this is a kind of a
But
Paul
wait, when did he
sort of
record
thing.
it relative to when the pod comes out? Can we
Oh,
do some
I don't know. No, yeah, I don't. That hurts. But anyway,
time travel math?
early this week, George said that there was going to be a big team meeting this week at Merck, which has already happened, this team meeting, to understand why the car performance has fallen behind where it was, especially given that the dry spar conditions should have played to their strengths. He said it was pretty underwhelming, to be honest. We tend to favour the cooler conditions. We couldn't have asked for anything better, but we've just had no pace recently. We're going to sit down with the engineers. We've got to sort this all out, and we're hoping for some kind of improvement in Hungary. Well, we already know the answer to that one because by the time this story had already broken and we're recording the pod now, we know what happened in Hungary. So it seems like that was a good meeting.
Well, but also they were surprised too. We're back to the Mercedes
true.
are confused why their car is good. They'd
True.
worked it out. They'd undone whatever they'd done to the car when it got worse, and now they don't know why it's good again. So Nat fart on the infield, and there we go. But with that, let's move to the video vault. I was finally not on the road for a week. It turned out to be a lot busier than I thought, so I do have some videos, but I haven't watched the big one. First of all, apparently there's some rumor that this has become the Alex Albon Eats Things review channel, because this will be the third Alex Albon eating thing video that I've run across. F1 driver Alex Albon rates food from Thailand and the UK, Snack Wars, Sport Bible channel, sport in capitals, so I guess it's Sport Bible. 8 minutes. This is, like I said, the third installment of a video like this. I've seen it on Jolly and on wherever the other one was the First Week Feast channel. But it's just Thai food versus British food in similar veins. Dessert, snack, appetizer, whatever. And I'll give you a hint. Thai wins handily. He just seems like such a good guy. Every time I watch an Albano video, I sit there and I think he would be fun to hang out with. Like, he seems like a normal guy. You could have a great time with him. And I've gotten so into this Albon's awesome mindset that if he turns out to be a jerk behind the scenes, I'll be crushed at this point. Like, levels, do you remember when Lance Armstrong and his charity and the cancer thing, and he had the bands, and everyone's buying the bands for cancer, and he's winning the Tour de France, and everyone's really excited. And then it turns out he's a big doping jerk, and everyone's like, what? Would be this. I can't think of another. I've built him up so far. It's Armstrongian. Armstrongian?
Ooh.
There we go. Rob, over to you, because you found one you were head over heels about.
I love this video, and you can always tell with me if I really like a video because I saw it drop. So it's Max Verstappen and Chris Harris drive the all-new Ford Mustang GTD on the Ford Performance Channel, weighing in at 38 minutes.
That's a movie.
I don't
38
have-
minutes
I
is
don't-
a movie.
It's a movie, and I was like, I like Chris Harris from Top Gear days, so I'm going to give this a try. I'm not expecting to get past 5 minutes, if I'm brutally honest. First time I looked at the counter to see where I was, 33 minutes into a 38-minute video. It just flew by. I love it. It's really kind of three main segments. It's them getting into an old Ford Mustang from the rally eras and driving to a track. And just Chris just asking Max about how does he drive, what does he think of when he attacks different corners or new tracks. It's just really him getting inside the mind of how does Max drive a car. Then they stop before they get to the track and they kind of start drawing out different corners in sand. And he starts asking Max to show his favorite line through this hypothetical corner that he's just made.
Wow.
And it's just great. And then they end up driving the new Mustang on track, and watching Chris Harris alongside Max is just brilliant. You've just got to pay attention to how laser focused and utterly still Max Verstappen stays versus the amount of movement you're going to see in Chris Harris's body as they go around corners. And I've come out of this video a much bigger Max fan than I was going on. Guy seems like a genuinely nice guy. He's obviously got the brain the size of a planet when it comes to racing. One of the things they talk about is like, oh, yeah, no, people say, the Red Bull car is like designed for you. And he basically says, I don't like this year's Red Bull. I just think one of my strengths is I can adapt to things, and I think I'm able to extract the most that this thing has got to offer, but kind of a little asterisk there, which, by the way, ain't much. So
Yeah.
It's just fascinating. I think it's 38 minutes well spent. You should definitely watch it, Brian.
I do love Chris Harris. I've watched him for years. Even before Top Gear, he had the Chris Harris on Cars and so good. I once saw him. If you're ever really bored, he bought an old Audi S4, and then someone brought up a new RS4 next to it, which is much more money, much more power, and they tuned the living crap out of the S4. Again, very old used grocery getter, and they were the same pace. He's like, for like a fifth the money plus a couple grand in tune, you can turn it. It may blow up in a week, but it'll be faster than all get out for a little bit. But anyway, I will watch that, and I recommend everyone do the same. A couple more. Which driver would make the best strategist? Bernie Collins F1 Unpacked on Sky Sports F1 7 minutes. This was way more fun than I anticipated. I tuned in just to see if I could understand half the stuff Bernie was saying, and I just was so into this video. Like her description of strategist week, race weekend, team, how it works, and then they asked her which driver that you've worked with would make the best strategist. And I'm not going to spoil it, but I will tell you I forgot she worked with the driver she said. So I'm like, oh, I'm an idiot. And then it's great to walk away with 11 more points. The Vowels verdict from the Belgian GP on the Atlassian Williams Racing Channel, 9 minutes. This was great. I love when people like James and team principals and people behind the scenes kind of give you access. And I love the access to folks like James so we can have a vowels movement for all of us to listen to. That was awesome. And of course, if you haven't seen Internet's best reactions from Matt P1 or Lollipop Man, as always, check those out. Anything else, Rob, or shall we close it?
I was just going to say, somebody on Threads, and sorry, I don't remember the account because I just saw it, was saying that James Vowles is such a nice guy that kind of hoping that somewhere out in the universe exists a James Constant who is the complete opposite, like an anti James Vowles, and it's kind of like good versus evil. Um, it doesn't really work for too many of those things. You got Toto Wolf. Is there like a Toto sheep out there that doesn't have an angry email that he sent someone? But yeah,
I
it was
got
a
it
good
here. I
show.
printed it out. All right, let's get to the weekend that was. No sprint, so a little bit more straightforward. And we went to practice, and I didn't see any of it. So, Rob, tell us about practice.
So FP1, not a lot really happened, but I will just say two things. I really felt bad for Paul Aaron. He came in to drive for the Alkenberg for FP1, and I think his fun lasted a handful of laps before they heard the radio message, which ultimately resulted in really sorry, retire the car. So he had a handful of laps. Something went on the dash. He's like, "What does this light mean?" They went, "Yeah, that's bad. Bring it back." And
Wait, hold
then
on. It was at Hungary. Was it a check engine light? Because that's what the circuit looks like.
yes, it was. And Fernando Alonso is old father time catching up with him a little bit. We know the amount of stress that goes through and the whole body, not just the neck, but like they said on the commentary, these guys are sitting like an inch off the floor, doing lots of miles an hour over bumpy tracks, and it's not exactly like the seats are lazy boys padded and for your comfort. They are basically just shells that you sit in. So Alonso was struggling with a bad back, so he dropped out of FP1, and
I
Drugovich
mean,
came in, sparking all these rumors that Drugovich would race this weekend. But no, Alonso just needed an hour. I just need
he's
an hour to soak in a bath, and then I'll be all right.
he's 44. He just may have woken up wrong. I mean, he's not far from our age where like sleeping can break things.
That's very true. Very, very true. And FP2 really started seeing the first appearance of the helicopter. And if you hadn't even seen practice, you would have noticed it because it was always lurking in the background of any of the shots down the home straight. You could see the helicopter at the end. And they really went to town on it. And they had Brundle like sitting in this helicopter. I envisage him kind of half hanging out with binoculars watching the cars as they kind of swooped above it. If anyone's old enough to remember the intro to Knight Rider, where they had a helicopter with a spotlight just illuminating kit as they were driving along, it kind of gave those types of vibes, only it wasn't at night. But they caught Oscar on a hot lap. And it was amazing to see. Like, we always see them catching traffic, and we always kind of see it down at ground level. You see a car coming towards you, they go past, or it's from the onboard, and you see them swoop past someone. But this was a helicopter view tracking Oscar while he had to thread his way through about 3,000 cars. They found extra cars to bring out onto the track to get in Oscar's way. It was amazing. The other thing of FP2, little side note stories here. Max was driving along and was like, "Well, what's this?" and found a towel in his car. So he pulled over to the side to try and throw it out. He thought he'd slowed down enough that the wind wouldn't catch the towel and it wouldn't end up on track, but he failed massively in that. He went to throw it out off the track. He's still doing 80 miles an hour, even though he slows down. So the wind catches it immediately and just drops it behind him on the circuit. So we had a little Red Bull towel on the circuit for a while. And then we had the great Science lost telemetry and radio. And the way that they decided to tell Science that they'd lost all telemetry and radio was to go on team radio to tell him that they had no radio.
You're kidding. They didn't actually do that.
No, and I'm just sitting there listening to this thinking, what? And even the commentators like, yeah, we're going to need to go back old school here, and they're going to have to put out the pit boards with like Science, no radio, but it came back within a lap or so. But what was scary on that was that I think it might have been Hadjar, maybe Lawson. I think it was a racing bull. Came up behind Sainz. He was right in the way. He got the good old sweary radio message going, that idiot, he's right in my way. And they just kind of came on and went, not his fault. He's got no radio.
Yeah,
so
he's like Stevie Wonder out there.
It just does go to show you, though, how much the drivers, it isn't those tiny little mirrors that they're using to work out if someone's on a hot lap behind them. They massively rely on that radio communication.
I mean, by the time they see someone in that shaky, tiny rearview mirror, if they're on a hot lap and you're not, and you look in your mirror, it's too late. By the time you see them, they have already caught you, and you've already screwed it up. So, totally agree.
And then FP3, I mean, McLaren were in a league of their own. Like, they were racing at a different circuit. They were driving F1, everyone else was driving F2. They were just so far clear. There's no way those two aren't completely being miles ahead in qualifying. Question. So McLaren are in a league of their own. Ferrari looked best of the rest. Red Bull looked woeful. And Aston was 6th and 7th.
I mean, that was wild. That was wild. So we move on to Qualy, and I got my first look at the new facility, the new pit lane facility on both sides, the paddock and the cantilevered grandstand. Looked awesome. Looked phenomenal. I watched this. I'm like, wow, Hungary, good job.
Yeah, good job apart, though. Did you hear the commentators' little request that they want added to the new facility?
No. An elevator that works?
These big new grandstands, which are absolutely fantastic. They said, but the one thing they haven't put on top of the grandstands are flags. So every time for every other track, they try to work out if the wind has changed. We've got a headwind, which way's the wind blowing. The commentators will always look at the flags that are aloft the grandstand. They haven't installed any at Hungary, so they were very disappointed.
Well, you spend $1.5 billion building it, but you ain't got $5 left for some flag holders.
We'll give them a dirty side flag if they want one.
Yeah, exactly. Aston, they looked phenomenal as we get into Q1. Bortoletto, it was really fun to watch the teams evolving, except maybe for Williams, who kind of struggled this weekend with this track as a whole. Alex with the slowest time in Q1. Nico, Esteban, the gas man, and Yuki all out. And this was my first inkling that Red Bull was going to have a bad weekend, because I look at it and go, all right, Yuki out in Q1. That's happened before in Red Bull, but he's only a 10th off Max, who's kind of in the middle of the pack. And I'm like, okay, A, good for you, Yuki, closing the delta to Max. But B, why are the Red Bulls so far down at this track?
Yeah, agree. And then Q2 came in. We had a little bit of kind of rain, but not rain. It was non-rain that caused a big drama in the pits. So people weren't sure if this was going to develop into anything. It was essentially a little bit of drizzle at turn 1 and turn 6. We saw pictures of the grandstands, or some of the grandstands, people putting their umbrellas up. It's like, okay. So people went out and got some early runs in. But then it really didn't look like it had cost any time for anybody. It's like, yeah, this probably actually isn't a rain event at all. But it kind of it jumbled everything up, because people had gone out way earlier than they really wanted to, so they weren't benefiting from evolution, all that kind of good stuff. But oh dear, a Ferrari that had looked good all through practice just looked like it was going to be challenging for best of the rest spots, and Mr. Hamilton messes his outlap up and doesn't get the temperature into his tyres, according to both him and Fred. So I'm going to take that as what happened, and he's out in 12th spot.
Yeah, we lose Antonelli, Colapinto, Carlos, Lewis, and Ali. He was so hard on himself. Useless, useless. And then he even said later in the day, they should do something about the driver in this car. Him, he's talking about. I mean, he was really hard on himself following that lap. And again, Lewis, man, and Kimi. I mean, again, At least they both made it to Q2, but they were out in Q1 and Q1 last weekend, and now we're both out in Q2. I will say this: the helicopter, I missed practice, so I'm watching, and they show the helicopter from the ground. And I'm like, well, that's rare that you just focus on the helicopter. And then they cut to the helicopter shot for forever. And the helicopter pilot is going to town. I mean, we're doing aerials. We're upside down. He's 4 inches off the cars. Or I'm assuming it's a he because only men would be so stupid to drive that thing like that, fly that thing like that. And I'm like, this is insane. It reminded me of one Top Gear a million years ago when they were on a mountain road. And I can't remember if it was a Stelvio Pass or wherever they were. And the helicopter pilot was so close to the cars that they actually did a segment on the pilot. And they showed him flying around so low. And like the helicopter became part of the story. And for me, it did here too. And I didn't really care about it. But then last thing on Q2, Carlos gets over the white line, a tire over the white line into the fast lane in the pits. No one's moving. No one's letting him in. They just keep going. They have to roll the car back a little because he's kind of in the way. And then he tries again and he had to wait to the end. I'm actually enjoying the pit lane shenanigans of cars trying to get in and no one letting them in, and last week's 3-mile-per-hour crash. I'm just waiting for more of that.
Well, I'm glad you find fun in that. So there we are. On to Q3, where all the conversation was Lando or Oscar, because that's all it was going to be. They were
Right.
rocket
Had
ships.
to be.
No one was going to touch them. They were at least half a second clear of everybody else. And after the first runs, I think it might have been Lando. It might have been Oscar. Doesn't really matter. One of them had got provisional pole, and the other one was a gnat's whisker behind them. So that's all it was going to be. It's going to be who's going to get that, and then what's the best of the rest. So I think thinking this is the order, maybe Piastri comes in and he's on pole, and Norris is right behind him. I can't remember if Russell was next, but let's just go with it and say he was. That Russell came round and he was looking spicy, but he didn't quite get it. In fact, he ends up like a hundredth behind Norris. I'm like, okay, good effort, George. Nice one. All of this has been pushing Alonso and Stroll down the order. They went out really early and phenomenal pace in that Aston.
Phenomenal
Like,
pace.
oh my gosh, where are they going to end up? And they're getting nudged down. So, okay. So we got like Alonso, I think, in fourth. And suddenly somebody says, and we haven't seen the whole lap, basically. Somebody goes, Charles is on a great lap. And like out of nowhere, I think it might have been picture in picture, or for almost the last corner, they bring Charles into shot. And he's top. It's like, what? And this was, the other cars were still out. So this is kind of after the provisional runs, and the others have gone round because the others coming round. You think, that's okay, fine. McLaren's will sort it on their second run. That'll be absolutely fine. But they were nowhere near.
No.
Apparently, the wind changed direction, which was enough to upset the car, and it was 3/10 away. They didn't even improve on their own first runs.
And they were so much faster in Q2 than they were in Q3 because of that change in the wind or the track de-evolution or whatever happened. But it was slower laps for everybody. And Charles Chuck Leclerc, it reminded me of when we were in Canada and he was going by and I do the finger guns at the board like, let's see where he comes up. Bang! And I could never get the time right when he'd hit the scoreboard. That's what I thought of when that happened. I'm like, I wish I'd done the finger gun at the board.
I'm looking at this qualifying result, and I was hard pressed to even tell you which would I think was my biggest surprise. Is it Chuck defying the odds and getting pole?
It's got to be up there. Yep.
But scan your eyes down a little bit. The two tractors from Spa, the Astons that just looked like it would have been quicker to drive my lawnmower around Spa than it was to drive their Astons, are in fifth and sixth. Fifth and sixth. Two Aston tractors are in fifth and sixth, ahead of Bortoletto. What the heck's he doing
the rookie
up there?
in the Sauber who keeps impressing.
And those three are all ahead of one Max Verstappen.
Four-time reigning world champion. And then two
nuts.
Racing Bulls after that. Both made Q3.
Just insane. And I think I sent you the image. I don't remember if you posted it online or not, but F1, the official channel, put out this apparently from Chuck with a 1:15.372 all the way down to Isaac on a 1:15.915, closest top 10 qualifying in F1 ever. You know, people are saying, "Oh, Max sucks. He's down in eighth." Half a second separated the entire top 10. Half a second from pole position to 10th. That is absolutely insane. It felt like it was close. I didn't realize it was that close until F1 put their little graphic out. So,
yeah.
Wow. Wowzers.
Which set up the question of what will happen going into turn one. What will the race bring us? Will Hungary give us something good? Can Charles hang on to win? It's not a high overtake circuit. So we've seen in 21 Fernando Alonso made his car very wide and allowed his teammate Esteban Ocon to win by holding up Lewis Hamilton for 7 laps or so. How long could people defend? What would the strategy do? Would there be rain? Question the wind? Who knows? We get there, and we watch as the beginning starts. 1 through 11 all on medium tires. Starting first, Charles, all the way up to Lewis, but before Lewis. Lewis was on hards in 12. Everybody's on mediums. So the pundits are all like, oh, it's a two-stopper. If you're starting on mediums, and the way this is all planned out, it's going to be a two-stopper. And so that was kind of a given. And then all of a sudden, you get one team radio message from Oscar, and it's something along these lines.
You will not have the drink.
Okay, so Oscar's got no drink in 2. We're going two-stopping. Lewis is on hards. This is going to be awesome. And for a couple of laps, it was.
I'll tell you when I thought it went into snooze fest. I thought it was more than the first 2 laps.
Yeah,
but
for me it was 8. And I'll tell you why I said it was lap 8.
Oh, yeah, okay. 8, 10, something around there. Yeah. I think it was when the first... Yeah, okay, we'll get there. So I got to be honest, I was expecting first corner chaos. I really thought we were going to get a crash, especially when Lando started weaving all over the place as to who he was going to start putting moves on.
Pull to the right to cut off everyone.
I'm like, there's no way everyone gets through this first corner cleanly, but they did.
Too wide.
George and Fernando made up ground, and Lando went backwards. So that wasn't the perfect start for Lando. So I was thinking, oh, here we go. I'm already starting to think about the pod and thinking, are we going to be talking about more mistakes from Lando here and why Oscar's going to be consistent and win the championship? That's what's going through my mind at first corner. Bortoletto puts a move on Lance. I'm like, what is going on in the world?
We did have a very jumbled up top 7 or so. The whole thing, top 10, was just crazy.
Yeah, Hamilton compounded his awful qualifying by going backwards by 2 spots straight away. Max jumped very quickly to take Lance. And then we started getting false start things come up. Now, you and I were in Canada. We saw the guy going up and down the track, dropping the little sensors in.
Yes, we did. And then taking him out quickly before the track invasion.
Yeah, before any of us could steal them. And they were checking each of them to make sure they were getting a signal. And if they weren't, he had his little pliers and he pulled them out and he put a new one in. They checked it was all okay. So when they investigate false starts, I'm assuming that it's just to double check that the sensor wasn't faulty, because it's binary, right? If the sensor senses movement before the light goes out, what's the need of an investigation? Because you bang to rights, sensor got you, false start, you're done. Yeah. So, but I'm guessing what they have to do maybe is just like double check, did the sensor really send? I don't know.
Well, fascinatingly, like at first they noted Bortoletto for a false start. Then we see a car, and there's a little, as the clutch is engaged in first gear, and a little bit of a leap before it goes. Not much. And they're like, oh, that's clearly a jump start. And then they're like, wait, that's Hulk. And then we see the Bortoletto on board, and he didn't move. And now I'm confused. They got the green cars just confused. It's a Sauber question. Must be the rookie. And then it was Hulk. He did get a penalty. It was minor. When they watched it again the second time, Brundle and Crofty are like, yeah, that's not nearly as bad as it seemed the first time we saw it. Because the first time you just cut right to that little kind of hesitation in the car. The second time you watch the whole thing, you're like, oh, come on. He didn't like get an advantage by doing this, but he did move a little bit.
Yeah. And then there was a potential record on the cards, by the way, this week. So Ollie Behrman qualified in 11th.
Yeah.
And if he'd stayed there, he would have taken the record for the most consecutive finishes in the same position where that position is something other than first. That snappy title of a record. So Fernando Alonso was like, yeah, but I quite fancy setting a record. What, by the way, can someone check, what's the record for the longest ever DRS train? Because you took this picture and it was brilliant.
Yeah, so wait, one thing before we get to lap 8 where this happened. I did enjoy the Alonso-Bortoletto-Max battle because Alonso's Bortoletto's manager. Bortoletto is a rookie. Alonso hasn't been anywhere near the points in 412 years in that Aston Martin. So he's 5th, and his protege, if you will, or managee or whatever, mentee, is behind him. And Fernando's like, not today. You do this on someone else. And then Max, who is actually friends with Gabby, as he calls him, like is right behind Bortoletto. And I'm like, this is interesting. Who's going to attack who? And we know Max will attack everybody. But we'll see how that goes. But yes, on lap 8, after all that happened, we had the world's longest DRS train. In 5th place, Fernando Alonso. Bortoletto behind him, and I won't do all the times because we'll be here all day. Verstappen, Stroll, Lawson, Behrman, Hadjar, Sainz, Antonelli, Hamilton, Ocon, Albon, Gasman, Colapinto. All of them were in DRS of each other. That's from what, 5th to 19th?
You had 13 wagons behind you.
A 13-car DRS train. That good, well done, Fernando. And this is lap 8, so it's not as though this is lap 3 where we've just had the launch and where everyone's so close naturally. We've 8 laps into the race and we have a 13-car DRS train. Congratulations, Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, it was just insane, kind of how they stayed together for a while. Then, almost as quick as they were together, you kind of blinked, and all of a sudden there were 20-second gaps everywhere.
Right.
And I'm not quite sure how that's
Fernando
happened.
took off at some point and broke a lot of these DRS trains, and everyone kind of found their own pace. But he backed it up for a while to manage his tires so he could run his own race. And he's like, if no one wants to watch this race, I don't care because I'm going to get some points out of this thing.
Yeah, so then we had Charles was pulling away, and I'm like, I'm very confidently talking to everybody at the bar saying, Charles is just trying to make hay while the sun shines here. He's just trying to make a gap. The McLaren looks after its tyres way better. This is a false lead because Oscar doesn't need to chase him down now. He's just going to wait for Charles to kill his tyres.
And I said the same thing. He's killing his tyres to build a lead.
Yeah, absolutely. And the graphic had flashed up that the two-stopper, if you were going to go medium, hard, mediums, then the two-stopper window, I think they flashed it was like 14 to 22, something like that, right? I think that's the graphic that came up. So it was 19. We had a few people come in earlier than that. I was like, okay, so this does look like a two-stopper. What had we had? Hulk, Colapinto, Ocon, Albon, Verstappen. They'd kind of all come in, but it was none of the front runners that had troubled the boxes. And then was it Oscar that came in first?
Yes, Oscar came in to undercut Charles from second. And Ferrari responded. That was 19. On 20, Ferrari responded and boxed Charles. George boxes too. And Oscar was just too far back. He was a couple, 3 seconds back. So that's a big undercut to cover. And it didn't work. Charles came back out in the lead. But this was my favorite part of the race in this lull period. Was on lap 21, Oscar boxed on 19. Lando goes around on 20, and I'm like, what are you doing? We've seen them do this before, leaving someone out 2 or 3 laps too long.
Yep.
Make a decision one way or the other. They go to the pit wall and Zach Brown, and I know Zach's not, while he's in the interview process, not literally listening to the team strategy. I know Andrea is closer to the strategy than Zach. I get all that. But they go to Zach, what are you doing with Lando's strategy? And he says, we are assessing Lando's strategy on lap 22. It's been 3 laps since Oscar boxed. 3 laps of him passing the pits, and you're wondering why. Either you're all in or you're all out. A tire offset, and this is where Rob and I started arguing a little. Tire offset does you nothing here. Track position means everything. It can help, but we really didn't see a lot of passes. Charles fell back because his car setup was garbage by the end, and he was moaning and whinging and whining and complaining all get out. Otherwise, it really felt like it mattered track position versus...
It does, but to me it was all about how much tyre offset could you create. I thought Ferrari... which was the one where they did the fake, where McLaren came out and said box, box, and then didn't, and Ferrari came in?
There was one of them where Oscar threw a dummy at lap 40 where they brought McLaren out for the second stop, and Charles came in and boxed.
That's the one. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ahead of myself.
Yeah.
So at this point, they were right in the window, and Lando was coming to the end. If they put that graphic up that said 14 to 22 is the two-stopper, and Lando can make it to 22, and at this point, I thought, do you know what, that's a fair shout, because if he's able to extend this run, it's only going to pay him dividends later. Like, assuming that everyone's on the two-stopper, just means that he'll then continuously be on fresher tyres than those around him, right? So that's where I thought I wasn't as... Like, you were a little bit kind of, you wrote WTF in the notes as to kind of, but I thought, no, Lando goes to 22, if he can eke 23 or 24. But then when it kind of gets to like 24, 25, and Lando's still out there and is hemorrhaging time to the ones behind him, I'm like, I think he's doing this.
He better be at that point.
He better be doing, otherwise he's kind of in the middle of no man's land. You can't be a 1.5 stop strategy.
Right, and this is actually where Crofty and Martin were like, he's guaranteed 4th position. There's no better unless he stays out. They have to keep him out because there's no way you're catching 1, 2, or 3 at this point. I will say this. Can I just say thank you to Max F. Verstappen? Lap 24, he takes Nico at one of the chicanes towards the back of the track. It's the third time he'd passed people in the middle of nowhere.
Yes, he
Almost
had some
every
great
pass,
overtakes. Yeah,
almost every pass was a DRS overtake at the end of into turn one for almost every pass. Max,
yep.
I don't think he passed anyone there. He then took Pierre the next lap at the same point. He ran Lewis off the track. They decided it was like, what lap was it? 29. On lap 29, Max goes on the inside of Lewis. Lewis goes off to the outside. We never see an onboard. Thanks, great direction, F1. We never saw if there was contact. We got real close, but there was a signage board in the way at that point. I'm like, great, I still don't know. And then the FIA is like, yeah, we're going to investigate this after the race. It's lap 29 of 70. We're not even halfway there. You're going to let the investigation hang? And since we're recording right after the podium, still don't know if Max got a penalty for doing that. But anyway, thank you, Max. All of your overtakes were phenomenal. I loved watching it. I loved watching you drive today a car that was a tractor. You made it look racy at times. Anyway, but back to where
Well,
we were.
so I forgot to say that when Lando did come in to take his stop,
31.
31. So rewind back to 22. 22, where all the two stoppers had gone and Lando obviously hadn't. I would say it was from like 22 through to about, well, it's when Oscar throws the dummy that you put in the notes, around 40. That was the lull in the middle for me. It was kind of like 18, 20 laps of, I'm glad I'm down the bar so I can talk to people, because really not a lot is happening. And,
Max, it was just
kudos
Max taking some overtakes, and that was it.
I'll just say kudos to you for keeping all the notes going in that lull. I was expecting to come back and open the notes up and just see lull and like nothing written for 20 laps.
So
But
I again, as a tire nerd, and you and I have talked about this, and we usually agree, the tires last too long. And for people to think you couldn't do a one stopper, we watched Lewis go 43 laps on his hard tires.
yeah,
And he started on the hard, so he had higher fuel load. There's no way and again, I know we learned all this during the race because it was cooler today, the winds were different, yada, yada, yada. The point is, it was obvious you could do a one stopper by about halfway into the race. And everyone who'd already started the twos, I'm willing to bet every strategy team was thinking, crap, do we have to box again? At one point later, I think it was like 44, 45. They asked Max, can you make it to the end from here? And he's like, mate, are you having a joke? Because you'd gone, like you say, 19 or so, you left too much. And you've also pushed, assuming there's a second stop. So
exactly.
unless you
Yes.
manage towards a second stop or manage towards a one stopper, it's hard to do that. But with Lando, he boxed on 31. He came out fourth, but he's done with his pit stops. He's within a pit stop of 1, 2, and 3. And I sent a text to Rob. I said, Lando isn't that far back of 1, 2, and 3 and is done boxing. Just making a note. And you're like, you thought
I was
he's
adamant.
screwed. Yeah.
I thought he was screwed. I thought he maybe had a chance at more than fourth, but at least if he'd have followed the others, he was guaranteed fourth, like you already said, right? But I looked at this and he's come out. He's a pit stop behind. So and the
Of
others
the
have to make a
leader.
pit of the leader. So the leader has to make a pit stop. So that's the pit stop in hand. And all that's going to happen is Lando's tires are going to be older and older and older and older and older. And when the leader finally pits, they're going to come out on shiny new tires. So there's just no way that this one stopper is faster. I'll come to later where I think that undid itself. And I think actually Lando even said it in the interview afterwards. But at that point, yeah, I'm totally thinking they rolled the dice, they had to. But they're a pit stop behind now, and all the others are going to make their pit stops. And even if some of them come out behind him, they're going to gobble him up because he's just going to be on tyres that have had to have done 40 laps. So at that point, yeah, I was all in on. I don't know that Lando's got a shot here, but we'll see.
And my point was, this you and I have said this is Monaco without the barriers. Track position is king, and so I said I'm not so sure that he's screwed. I think track position's super important. And then you said the others will come out and pass him while he's nursing old hards, and I said pass him where? And so like
Pass
I
him.
wasn't
Look at,
sure.
I mean,
Again, I wasn't
we'll
sure. I'm not saying I thought he was going to win. I'm just saying this may work out better than we think.
yeah, true. So then we had, and when Oscar threw his dummy on lap 40, to me, if that was intentional to see if they could force Ferrari to follow them, that was genius. Because, and we're going to come to this later
Yeah.
on your exact point here about track position, they created a 6 lap offset to Charles because they said box box. Charles got, we're going to come in as well then to cover you off. Oscar breezed by, did 6, 7 more laps it was before Oscar finally comes in. And now I felt that Charles was in no man's land. They pitted him for that second pit stop way earlier than I think they would have planned to,
Yeah.
which meant they created that tyre delta offset, which meant which kind of goes against your point from a second ago. He was a sitting duck eventually.
But something was wrong with his setup. Like that,
No,
Charles.
I don't
yes.
think that is such a cop out.
No.
There's no
What do
way
you mean?
that
He was
car just.
he was moaning on the
whinging.
radio
He was moaning
about something he disagreed with the team with, and he said, "I
the
told you
strategy.
this was
I think
wrong."
the time they came in, I
No.
think
I think it was more than that. I think they had
car just
front
doesn't
wings
magically
set
get
different.
slower.
It got worse as the day went on, the whole day, and he was complaining
I just
before
don't
his
think he
first
ran on
stop.
hards very well.
I don't know,
Because
but
he was pulling away. He was pulling away from the McLaren. Right, if that car setup was bad, he wouldn't have pulled out a 3.5
after his
second
first
at
stop,
the
he
beginning.
was complaining the whole rest of the race.
He was just. There were a couple of drivers today that annoyed me with whinging because just suck it up and drive.
We'll find out. There was something he disagreed. Maybe it was where the stops were, but he hated something in that car today, and he drove angry, and he got a penalty, an unsportsmanlike driving penalty, because he was so pissed, and that's un-Leclerc-like. Like, we are not used to seeing him having his own personal
just an incident
situations, right? I mean, that's not really a Charles situation.
I think he got angry that they got tricked into pitting early. He had a tire. He couldn't. The Ferrari was good compared to the McLaren today, but I don't think it was good enough once you put the tyre offset in there. And I think he knew that. He knew that Oscar was coming to get him.
Maybe.
And like you say. And then when George came to get him, I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Something was bad. He was complaining about a lot of car problems. And I will say this. I would much rather be the team setting the strategy than the team reacting to others' strategy. True. Ferrari today was reacting, with Charles, was reacting to others' strategy the whole time. They didn't seem to have their own strategy. Like, oh, we should box now because we don't want, because Oscar stopped and tried the undercut, didn't work. And then Charles stopped, and then it may have been earlier than they wanted. And then, to your point, they actually got fooled by the dummy on 40, and they came in, and they had 30 laps to go. So maybe, I don't know, but Charles was...
So what happened about lap wherever it was, 48, 49, is we came out of the lull and we got into the second slice of exciting bread, and we saw Piastri they were doing the kind of countdown to striking distance of Piastri catching up to Charles, and they were like, well, it's now going to depend on how long Charles can keep Oscar oh, he's gone. It was like first time Oscar got into Charles's DRS striking distance on the home straight, boom into turn one, see you later. There was nothing. Charles, there was no fight. He didn't even seem to position his car. So then we got, what was it, 10 laps of watching George was on an absolute flyer. He set the fastest lap. They were doing, the striking distance countdown starts coming in of George to Charles. It was just...
There were two of them.
Great watching. Yeah.
George to Charles.
Yes.
And we were watching Oscar to Lando. And when Oscar
we weren't watching it because we never saw that. We focused on the camera direction. And do you know what? Actually, fair play to them. It panned out beautifully for them in the end. They watched the one that was the closest battle, which was the George all over Charles. We could all see the countdown in the top left-hand corner of how close Oscar was getting. And it was almost the moment that George passed Charles became the time where Lando was looking in his rearview mirror and seeing Oscar. So actually, to be fair, they probably did concentrate on the right.
They did. But Oscar kept getting closer to Lando. I kept watching it. George tried to take Charles once on a DRS overtake into turn one. And the first time on lap 61, the first time it was a little questionable. And George got on the radio and made it sound like Charles had taken out a machine gun and shot at his tires. And he's like, he moved under braking. And a little. Even the commentator's like, not that bad. Okay, and Charles is like, you didn't think that was too bad? Wait until the next lap. I'm going to just keep jinking to the right. Bing, bing, bing. He's just like, every time he's under braking, he just keeps moving right. It's like jerk wheel right, brake, jerk wheel right. And George, I don't know how George didn't hit him. George did a great job moving under his own braking, under his own dive bomb on the inside around. I thought that was, Charles, I think, deserved the penalty. It's very un-Charles-like. Yes. He's one of the, in my opinion, cleanest racers. You don't expect him to do things like that. That was him irate, as y'all Brits like to say, driving with the red mist. He was pissed off.
Yes, no, agree. Then we got almost not a sliding doors moment, but Lando moaning about traffic. And at this point, I was just like, I like Lando, but sometimes, and maybe it was just him being frustrated in the heat of battle, but seriously, you're going to moan that there's other cars on track? How dare there be other cars on track? It's like, oh, these back markers are going to cost me the race. Well, that's called F1. If you're fast at the front, you lap people. Deal with it. I didn't like that.
Well, don't you
Like,
remember when McLaren first got fast and he dealt with the back markers and he said something like this?
They're not racing for anything.
They're not racing for anything. That was you for like years
however,
in a row.
yeah. However, I honestly think that little segment of back markers, they had to get through about 5 or 6 of them. I know Oscar technically carried on staying in touch with Lando, but the rate at which he was catching him
Yes,
definitely
I
slowed. I
agree.
think while Lando got upset about it, I think that back marker section delivered in the win.
I
As
would
well as
actually agree
Lando
with you.
driving a brilliant race, right, and
Yeah.
extending those tires and all that kind of good stuff, Lando also did no mistakes, even when he had wing mirrors full of Oscar. I was just waiting for him to put it on the gravel in turn 12 or whatever it
I
was.
agree. I would actually add something to that. He was taking a lot of curb and six. He was doing a lot of things the commentators were having a little problem with. But he drove a great defensive drive. So, two things. I think the back markers neutralized their battle. It meant
Yes.
that Oscar couldn't really catch up as at the rate a Nazi was doing. He had to wait to attack until they got through all of the back markers. So it bought Lando, I don't know, 3 or 4 laps of time, which
Yeah.
was a big amount because that's only gave Oscar like 2 or 3 corners, turn one attempts to attack him. Two, I thought Lando did a great job playing a defensive role, charging his
Yeah.
battery around the
Yeah.
lap and then deploying it on the straight. He reminded me of Fernando from 21. So I saw Fernando Alanis. Did I get that right? That would have worked. The
So
Minister
then
of Defense, Fernando Alanis.
and then so we ran out of laps for Oscar to make an attack because of that. I agree with you, totally agree with that. That back marker segment of whatever it was, 3 or 4 laps, was just 3 or 4 laps that Oscar wasn't in
Right.
clear air up Lando's trumpet. Then we got to the point where I don't know. I don't know if I believe Oscar in the immediate interview afterwards. I don't know if he was trying to explain away what he'd done. But lap 69 is the closest he's been. He gets into the DRS. I turn to my son at the bar, Reese, and I say, don't think he's close enough this time for a lunge. And before I've almost finished that sentence, he goes for an absolute ridiculous dive bomb up the inside, which for half a nanosecond, because Reese is a huge Mercedes fan, he is now believing, because he just said this about a lap before, I hope when Oscar catches Lando, they take each other out and George can inherit yet another win because he's a big George Russell fan. And it almost came how those two did not make contact when Oscar locked up like
Yeah.
that. I was convinced we were watching just Papaya bits all over the place. I was waiting for the contact.
I was too. I was too. I mean, it happened in front of us in Canada where we saw Lando try to take Oscar where there was no space and ran into him and hit the wall, and we have pictures to prove it. We've seen Oscar do this before. Was it Austria where he tried to? I can't remember. He tried to make a move on Lando, locked up, and the pit wall came back to him like, not quite that aggressive, please. So I think Oscar was desperate. He didn't get close on 68. He started from closer and couldn't get him on 68. On 69, he knows I have one chance after this, and I don't want to waste my opportunity. I'm further back. I'm going for it. And I am yelling at the TV, yelling to Lando, defend the inside. You know how hard it is to take people on the outside around that corner? It's possible, and we saw Oscar do it to someone earlier, but it's rare.
Yeah.
And Lando kept leaving the inside open. He opened for these dive bombs. And like when Charles was trying to cut George off, what did he do? He cut him off to the inside. I felt like it would have been wiser. I know you come out in worse position if you're taking an inside line to one, but where are they going to pass you? Honestly, this is Hungary, guys. Like, defend the inside. I'm yelling because Fernando always defends the inside on turn one, and he's a defensive genius for Lando Alanis.
Yeah.
And so I'm yelling, defend and he didn't. And he left that door open, and I'm watching Oscar come through. I'm like, uh-oh. And then he see the smoke. I'm like, uh-oh. Like, now I'm waiting for a crash. And
Exactly.
I'm like, unbelievable. But when that didn't happen, I kind of knew it wasn't going to happen on 70. It just felt like that was it. He put Oscar's like eggs, basket, all at once.
Exactly. And I think we were all saying it in the bar. It's easy for us to say as seasoned F1 drivers, but
All of
he
our
was
years of
so
behind the
close.
wheel.
He was so close on 69. that if he'd have just kept his powder dry, then he gets another little dose of DRS around the corner, he would have stayed within 0.3 of Lando for the majority of that lap, and then Lando would have used his battery like he was in the middle section to open it out again, because we kept seeing it go from 0.7 to 0.9, and then that was never enough on the back straight to make the lunge. He doesn't go for that dive bomb and stays tucked up right behind. Even if Lando extends with his battery and gets from a 0.3 to a 0.5, that is then such a better chance of overtaking on 70. And in the interview afterwards, he said something like, "You never know if you're going to get the chance again, so I just decided to do it now." But he didn't look like he had the conviction in his eyes. And he looked so frustrated with himself when he sat in the cool-down room when he was there by himself, that I think he knows he snatched at a chance on lap 69 that wasn't there. And had he kept his powder dry, he might have had a go. But the way Lando was actually driving and doing such a good defensive job, he probably would have held him off anyway. But I think we get a radio message as well from McLaren of another one of these. Remember what we say? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like
100%. Like, we all just crapped ourselves on the pit lane wall. So if you could take it easy, but yeah, Lando pulled it off. It was, again, like you say, I agree. It was 8 or so great laps to start, good laps to start. 14 or so, I'm making the number up, maybe more.
20 something,
20 to end. And then the middle was a bit of a lull, but Max at least made the middle fun by taking people in places he shouldn't. Like, his overtakes were phenomenal. I don't know if he won driver of the day. He should have, in my opinion, or maybe Lando. We'll get to the pits and the king of the pits.
Bortoleto was actually pretty high up the driver of the day.
Yeah, Bortoleto was great. He finished 6th, man. We didn't even talk about him since Qualy. He finished 6th in a Sauber on merit. No rain, no chaos. Anyway, we'll get to all that. The cool-down room was great as we close out the actual event. The cool-down room was great. When George saw Oscar's lockup on Lando, did you hear what he said to him? He said, "Why didn't you T-bone him?" And the other two started laughing uncontrollably. And then they get to the podium, and Lando maybe has learned a lesson. He took his massive handcrafted, porcelain-painted, beautiful trophy, moved it behind a board, then went and got Oscar's trophy, moved that behind the board, and then did a champagne spike and celebrated.
Did you see what he wrote on the champagne?
No.
So when he had picked up the bottle of Moët,
I couldn't read it. What did it say?
Don't drop the don't break the trophy or something like that was what he signed underneath the signature.
Nice. I like it.
He remembered. So yes, that meant that Lando goes into the summer break with a win. I guess that's given your statoid from the beginning of this episode.
Now 9.
That's his 9th win.
9.
Yep. Oscar right behind. George closed out the podium. Chuck, miserable Leclerc, came home in 4th. Fernando Alonso, from looking a country mile away from scoring any points in Formula One ever again of note, came home in 5th, which is amazing. Bortoleto came home in 6th.
Wild. In a Sauber.
In a Sauber. Rookie. Lance Stroll, who gets so much hate online for being daddy's boy only in F1 because his dad owns the team. I'm sorry. You do not bring an Aston Martin home in 7th, ahead of the Racing Bulls, ahead of Max Verstappen, ahead of Kimi Antonelli, ahead of Lewis Hamilton, ahead of all those other ones you want to name on there. You don't bring that car home if you're daddy's boy who can't drive.
Only 9 seconds behind Fernando Alonso, who everyone agrees is a wily old campaigner who can do anything.
Now, has he got a charismatic personality that everyone gravitates towards? No. Do people like him? No. But he's a good driver.
He is a good driver.
Aston home. Double points for Aston. Lawson in 8th. Max Verstappen in 9th. Antonelli snuck into the final points ahead of Hajar. Hajar driving the majority of the race with bullet holes in his fingers after the gravel.
What hurt worse? The gravel breaking his fingers or the seatbelts crushing his plums?
Lewis Hamilton brought it home in 12th. We had the 13th, Carlos Sainz 14th, Albon 15th. Why did they swap the cars? It wasn't for points. What was the purpose of that? Nothing was going to happen. That was quite late in the day to make that call. That was a bit weird. We had Ocon in 16th, Yuki in 17th, Colapinto in 18th, Gassman at 19th, and poor old Oliver Behrman couldn't make his record-breaking 11th in 5th because he had to retire.
He knew he was on my fantasy team. He wanted to give me a nice -20 to go into the summer break. Thank you, Ollie. Just to close out one other note, the 2-stop, 1-stop. Lando obviously won on a 1-stopper. Oscar, George, and Charles obviously did 2 stops because we've recounted both of those. However, after that point, Alonso, 1 stop. Bortoleto, 1 stop. Stroll, 1 stop. Lawson, 1 stop. Verstappen, 2. Antonelli one stop, Hadger one stop, Hamilton one stop.
Yeah.
So on a day when they were all predicting a two-stopper, again, this particular set of rubber, when you see a track cooler than anticipated, when you see wind changes and these tires, never doubt someone's going to go for that one-stopper.
Yeah, but, and I forgot to say this when we were talking about the podium in the cool-down room, when they interviewed Lando and they said, "Oh, what did you think of the strategy? Because you seemed a bit kind of like indifferent when they suggested a one-stopper." And he said, "Well, I thought it might mean we might get second or third rather than fourth, but I never had any hope for the win." And it was kind of nice to see it pan out that way. So, like, even the drivers themselves, I
Yeah.
think, whether it was the newly laid track helped this year or did something, or like you say, the conditions being cooler, something happened today where the one stoppers seemed to just sort of catch people by surprise on the day that, hang on, this is going to be quicker. So I am actually going to say, hats off to Pirelli. Today was a really good example of where there were two legitimate strategies. It wasn't that everybody just sleepwalk their way into a one-stopper because everybody was, or everybody did a two-stop strategy. Today we had a proper mix. Some made the two work, and we got the podium was 2/3 two-stoppers. Then, like you say, a whole raft of one-stoppers. It was just, yeah. Do you know what? I think that was a nice blend of different strategies at play.
Well, let's summarize our part before we hear from Paul. Let's talk about the pits and the king of the pits. Let's start with the king of the pits, and Rob, I'm going to start with you this week.
You're the king of the pit.
Who you got?
I'm going to do a flip-flop from last week where I refused to give it to the race winner because Bortoletto had done such a good performance. I felt he's never going to do it ever again, so I'll give Bortoletto king of the pits. This week, I feel bad that I really probably should give it to Bortoletto for doing his highest ever finish. But I gave it him last week because he would never do it again. So Bortoletto's got egg on my face here. So therefore, I'm going to say Lando because, he screwed up at the beginning. He got taken by two people. He has had a habit, as we've discussed, about not being able to sometimes roll with adversity and take the bull by the horns and take it. And he did today. And he was given a mission of, right, we're going to put you on a one stop and you're going to make it work and you're going to bring it home in first. And he absolutely nailed it. There was no little off moments where he missed a corner and went wide like he did last week when he was charging after Oscar, where we kind of said he cost himself the win by just silly little mistakes. There were none of them this week, so I'm giving it to Lando. What about you?
I'd like to say I'm giving it to Franco Colapinto in 18th because he moved up no, I'm just kidding. Oh man, yeah, I got to give it to Lando. We can't sit here and beat on him for making 3 or 4 errors that cost him a shot at attacking Oscar last week, and then not give him credit when he doesn't. When he has the mental fortitude to have someone behind him attacking for laps at a time. And can we echo something the commentator said? When you saw them get out of the car, both Lando and Oscar looked beat. Just tired. And like they had been out there doing battle for an hour and 45 minutes. So I'm giving it to Lando as well because I think he definitely earned this win.
You're the pits.
All right, so this one may not be wildly popular, but I am going to give the pits to Ferrari strategy. I know we just said about Fred and we talked about the macro versus the micro. I'm going to go on the micro. I'm going to look at the detail level of their performance today, and they stunk it out. I don't know what happened. The car was better than this. It just felt like this was the whole...
Let's add that to the words of wisdom.
Yeah, let's add that to the words of wisdom. They were angry. Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari started 12th, finished 12th. What? Charles Leclerc started on pole, I think he's converted 1 out of 612 pole positions into a win. This one, he finished 4th, and he was angry from the first pit stop on with the team, the strategy, the setup. I don't think it could have gone much worse from a strategic perspective for Ferrari.
Why don't you tell us how you really think?
I will tell you how I really think.
No!
I don't know on this one. I was looking down the bottom end and just thinking, there are Alpine and Haas. Did they even really turn up this weekend? Was there any point to them being there?
No.
I mean, Gasman and Colapinto just pootled around at the back and finished like 3,000 laps down. Ocon was 16th.
And SD Bestie said they were going to do well at this track. I was bought in on Haas, and then this is what you gave me?
Yeah, so I'm looking at Haas and Alpine and thinking you kind of could be collective. Williams,
Williams
just were
there
a
too.
non-event as well. It's just like just a whole bunch of teams that just did nothing. So it's really hard to pick one. And then anybody else that you try to look at and say, well, they finished beyond where they normally, Nico Hulkenberg has been given points recently. He had a bit of a witness protection race, but he got a penalty he had to serve. Yuki with all the same bits as Max now, and everybody celebrating how he's only 0.1 second behind Max in the quali and then ended up 3,000 miles away from him. Max had a shocker down in ninth. There's all these little mini contenders, but at the end of the day, it pains me to totally agree with you.
You gotta do better. You can't start 12th and end 12th with Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari. You got to move up a little bit, and you can't start pole and just recede.
Yes, if you're on pole and you've eked out a 3.5, whatever it was, 4-second gap over a McLaren, you have high ground here. You make a strategy that dictates what all the others have to do to try and keep up with you.
Right.
Not just what felt like them just going, what are we going to do? Like, we haven't been winning a race for a very long time. And someone's gone, oh, McLaren, they're walking away with the title. Should we just watch what they do and just copy that? Because then we'd probably be pretty quick. Oh, yeah, let's do that. I mean... Yeah, I'm with you.
All right. Let's see what a professional has to say about this. And as always, as we said, we're recording this one right after the podium, so we have not heard Paul's note. We actually don't even know if Max got a penalty for that Lewis situation because we're just giving this to you kind of as it comes. So I'm curious to see if Paul agreed or disagreed with some of our comments.
Hey now, and here we go with a race review of Budapest. As promised last week, I sort of got to see the last 15 laps of the race, which, I mean, to be fair, is probably the only really worth laps watching, if I'm being completely honest with you. So anyway, I start Friday there. Yeah, Friday. I love Fridays. Saturday, qualifying. I mean, obviously the big story is Lewis having a right little sulk, didn't he? Said he was useless, Look, one of them, bless him. It just... he's not bad. He's not gone bad. Nothing's wrong with Lewis. He's just simply trying to drive a car he's not used to. And Leclerc should beat him. And look, I mean, if Leclerc puts it on pole and Lewis is back down in 45th, then yeah, of course there's going to be questions. So I think, and he's a proud man. That's the next thing. He's a proud man. He doesn't want to be down there. He doesn't want to be, but again, also got to remember he has actually won a race this year. So I'm just going to say, I don't think Lewis should be so hard on himself. Is where I am a little bit. I'm a little bit thing with him, So yeah, whatever. Antonelli again sucked a little bit. It's painful to say. I don't really know. And Mercedes looked a bit ropey all weekend. I mean, amazingly, obviously, we know that they finished third in this race. That's a pretty good achievement. And then big shout to Aston Martin. Needless to say, Alonso, he's still got it. NEC, old guys rule. I'm telling you. And
look at us go.
Yeah, look, apart from that, I know there's a bit of contact in Lewis and Max during the race. I won't lie. I haven't really seen it. I don't think it's too much. The media... the media got this thing for Max. It's like him chucking the cloth out of the car. There's really no danger. It's so pathetic that I got to keep going on about it. Almost like they want to get Max a penalty. And, we say we're British bias. Being British, I don't like to think there is, but at the same time, I don't know. It's just, there just seems to be so much crap coming his way. But anyway, whatever. amazing for Bortoletto again, and again for Sauber. It's great to see them doing things. From what I understand, it was a decent race. I'm very critical of Lando, as you know, but he's done a great job there. On one-stop tires. Yes, okay, you're on a track that's sort of hard to overtake unless you've got the world of DRS. So you've got to give him credit. It's all right to hide behind why you can't overtake. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay, but you still got to do a job. He defended well at the end from Oscar. I mean, Oscar did try that risky move. What was it? Second from the end. That was pretty like whoa. But yeah, it's a good one. Good race. I thought, to be fair, like I said, it's easy to look at the situation and say, oh, yeah, well, the last few laps were what they were. That's what the race sets up ultimately. You've got to get his coat. It's a tight, twisty one. It's only short. I know you've covered all this. Summer break, everyone goes away now, gets a bit of time to recover, gets a bit of time to relax. And then we come back for what will be, I think, an insane second part of this season. It sounds weird saying second part because, like, I was in the hospitality at the track and, like, it's the 14th race. And it's like, how's there been 14 and there's 10 to go and we're just going through what we call a halfway break? Anyway, such is life. Apart from that, yeah, summer shutdown. Wow. I think everyone needs it. But yeah, again, I'm just going to echo those words again. Look at what Lando and Oscar just pulled up. The second part of this season is going to be electric. They're undoubtedly, it is between them. That's obvious. But I love the fact that McLaren let them go racing within reason. So yeah, let's see it continue. I sort of think I might have wrote this season off at the start, thinking, last one before the reg change, will it be really exciting? Sometimes you've got to put your hands up and say you're wrong. So everyone enjoy their shutdown. Everyone enjoy whatever you guys get up to. Sapman, I hope you enjoy your 1 pint less than me and Rob. But apart from that,
I will.
Well, first part done. Although in theory, 3/4 of it done. And I will speak to you again. Well, who knows? Who knows when I'll speak to you again? But a few weeks probably. Anyway, catch you soon. Bye-bye.
Oh man. So Rob, where are we at with? First of all, I agree with Paul. I think it's more than 14 or so, but the last handful of laps are good. I like the first half too, like you. So your sandwich analogy is.
I'm thinking it's
apt.
a boring sandwich.
Yeah.
On fantastic bread. Anyway, what everyone really wants to know is how the casino games for Hungary panned
That's what I want to know.
Yeah, you did well again, unfortunately. You've opened up a little bit of a gap now. We were tied with our predictions and everything, but Roulette came out with 20th, which was Ollie Behrman, which we said, luckily we cleared it up last week, or whenever it was. If someone retires, we'll just pick whoever F1 says is bottom of the stack.
Yeah.
So neither of us picked Ollie. I had Hulk, you had Colapinto. You were oh so close, but we don't give anything for that. Blackjack, I had Charles and Lewis, so I got 12 points for Charles. So I was feeling pretty happy with myself until I remembered that you picked Mercedes boys and had George and Kimmy. So you got 16 points, 15 for George and a solitary point for Kimmy. So
yes,
you took the blackjack hand. You went first on poker and you did the classic Lando, Oscar, Max. So you got 2 in a row, but not the right order. So it all came down to me here. Could I tie
Wait, I didn't.
hands
I
for the
said
week?
Lando, Oscar, Max.
Sorry, Lando, Oscar, Max. So you had 2 in the right order.
Yeah.
So I would need to pull out a phenomenal hand to beat you. So what I decided to do was pull out nothing because I had Isaac, Bortoletto, and Lawson who couldn't even see each other from the end of the race, let alone be close to each other.
Bortoletto and Lawson were only separated by a stroll.
Yeah, time-wise, a little bit more than that,
Yeah.
but okay. Which means you're now 17-12 up in the casino games. In race predictions, we both went Oscar Lando, so we were both correct but wrong order. And we both need to forget about our third step predictions. I said Max was an anomaly last year that he was so far off the pace because he crashed with Hamilton, so he'll be right back up there this time. You went for your bold prediction and looked all smug at yourself on the video when you put one Lewis Hamilton on the podium. So I should give you negative points for that.
I'm such a Lewis fanboy.
What that means is going into the break, I've got the 3-point advantage on the predictions, but you've got a 5-point advantage on casino. Put it all together, basically you're 2 up in the Rob versus Brian. So after 14 races and a gazillion points up for grabs, there is nothing between us. We're like Oscar and Lando going into the summer break. So
there you go.
So that's that, which means then driver standings, as we just mentioned them. Oscar stood a chance of going into the break with a 20-something or whatever it was, but he couldn't overtake Lando, so Lando chips away. We're back down to 9 points now. 284 plays 275, so Oscar goes into the break as the leader, but Lando's snapping away. The interesting one for me, I like your view on this. This isn't the one I saw coming at all. I was kind of hoping we would get a 3-way fight for the title. I'm disappointed we're not going to get it, but at least I'm happy that, like Paul just said, it should be electric the second half between these 2 McLaren boys. George, after his podium today, and Max finishing in 9th, Max Verstappen is on 187 points in 3rd, and George Russell is on 172 in 4th. Do you think George has a chance of finishing 3rd in the title this year?
It's a possibility. Max came out this week and said he's not going to win. Red Bull won't win another race.
Yeah. And that Mercedes, like you said, they don't know why it's quick, but it looks like it's quick again now. I don't know if I think Max will do enough to hold George off, I think. But then I thought he was going to do enough to sort of stay within touching distance of the McLaren boys, and he's not. So then we got Chuck down in 5th on 151 and Lewis on 109. And that's quite a gap then until Kimi down on 64. But yeah, it's interesting. Colapinto remains pointless, the only active driver on the grid without a point at the moment.
The second Alpine seat on a big goose egg.
Yeah, I know. And then those points for Fernando and Stroll have taken them up to 11th and 12th. What that's also meant, constructors-wise, was it last week when we were all Debbie Downers on Aston Martin?
We were wondering if they'd finish just above Alpine.
Yeah.
Not.
Oh my gosh. So McLaren are romping away with it. 559 points. Ferrari 260. Mercedes 236. Red Bull 194. Williams 70. Aston Martin is 6th on 52 points. Sauber on 51. Racing Bulls on 45. Haas on 35. And the Alpine tractor is down there on... Sorry, and Gasly is down there on 20 points.
Do you remember when we joked how they were using last year's chassis? And we were trying to determine whether that mattered or not. And I said, that can't be good. And you said, that can't be good. And we were talking to other people and like, oh, it'll be fine. Turns out, can't be good. Fantasy, real quick. I know there's 2 parts that people want to talk about. Number 1, Spa. Where did we end up with Spa? A lot of people, because it was a sprint weekend, used chips. So we had some high scores. Wanted on YouTube, Lee, our friend of the show, our friend on Discord, Lee, first place, tied for first with nothing, just an incident 1, Ryan. Both 375 points. Dang. Leave some points for the rest of us, fellas. Isham, IL, 365, tied with Franklin Cappuccino. Matt, great job. Oh, sorry, and the number 1 Formula, Tony, as well. 365 all. F1 Fantasy Tools from f1fantasytools.com in 6th. Quilla Racing Team in 7th. Switch to Plan B in 8th. Michael. Yank the Mic in 9th in a massive tie with 44th Gear Gavin, Box 1 Patrick. Yep, Bartek with Debiaski, Formula Fantasy Hub Rob, and the Noobs Busan, and the Kurdish boy Dahan, and Yank It Back from Australia, Mike. So we have Michael. He has 2 teams. Michael, we have to talk about that. Good job having such a good race, everyone, in Spa. We are still calculating. Right now, we are on provisional points. We've gone from projected points to provisional during the recording. Because this is important, though. Leader at the halfway break gets a T-shirt. And with the provisionals only, this is not, I'm not sending out the T-shirt yet. F1 Fantasy Tools is currently provisionally in the lead, ahead of Box 1 Patrick, and also very close 44th Gear Gavin. So it looks like one of those 3 will take the T-shirt. We will confirm next week when we record. We will confirm, and we will send out notes and make sure the T-shirt goes out to the first half leader.
Yeah, cool. Good stuff. Well, that's that. No race to preview. maybe just the fantasy update to do next week, and then maybe it'll be a busy week for news, although maybe it won't be because they're all in summer shutdown. So we'll find something. We hopefully going to have a couple of guests lined up over the break. We just got to see if we can the stars align for that. Who knows? Who knows what we'll have? But we'll be here. And we'll talk about something, and then we'll just count down the weeks with the rest of you until we finally get to be able to preview Zandvoort when we come out the other end of this this interlull.
That was a nice wrap up. With that, we'll talk to you in 1 week's time, everyone. Be well.